This single virgin loser is Ryu, our protagonist. His life is a total disaster. First, he gets bullied and beaten up daily. And if that's not enough, his little brother one day got bullied so badly that they made his little brother blind with multiple fractures. And if this was not enough, their parents also died in a car accident. But wait, there is more. One day on Christmas Eve, a hot damn angel kidnapped 9 billion people from Earth and teleported them into a dungeon, giving them unique abilities. While others get abilities like super strength or mind control, Ryu ends up with a skill so trashy, it's almost laughable. Well, all his stats are below average, every single one of them, and his unique gift, when he dies, he goes back to the day of New Year's Eve to start all over again. Then, without any unique abilities and with trashy stats, he died countless times, got tortured, betrayed, you name it. Yet, Ryu grits his teeth and drags himself through the hellish floors, one after another, for years, alone, and finally, after what feels like a lifetime of suffering, he reaches the top floor. However, the journey takes a cruel turn. To proceed to the final level, one must be part of a team of 5. Ryu, ever the loner and still a virgin, doesn't meet the criteria. So once more he dies, this time on his 99th attempt. Yet as fate would have it, the clock resets. It's New Year's Eve, and Ryu finds himself back at the starting point with one last chance to change his destiny. Seeing his hand still trembling, Ryu can't shake off the memory of the unimaginable pain he just went through. He can't believe that he died because he was alone on the last floor. It was almost too much to bear. Frustration kicks in. Clenching his fist and steeling his eyes, he gets ready to give it one more go, one final try. Ryu then yanks off his hoodie, throws it aside, and looks down at the ground. He's deep in thought, thinking about who he could possibly team up with this time around. So guys, today's goal is 2,000 likes. Please like and subscribe to support the channel. Now let's continue. The scene suddenly shifts. Now the spotlight is on this piece of shit, Youngmin, the guy responsible for turning Ryu's life into a complete, living hell. Youngmin and his underlings are all smiles, giddy about the fact that they're about to turn into adults. No more sneaking around with fake IDs to buy alcohol. They're in a chatty mood, talking about the jobs they want in the future. When it's Youngmin's turn, his smile turns darker, more dominating. His buddies ask him what's on his mind for the future. Without missing a beat, Youngmin says he's going to be a gangster. Hearing this, his friends pause. They look concerned, almost freaked out. They tell Youngmin he must be nuts. One bad move in that world, and it's curtains for him. But Youngmin, always the unapologetic jerk, brushes it off. In his view, he's got just this one life to live, so why not live it doing what he enjoys, beating people up? His friends manage a weak laugh, but on the inside, they're pissed off. They're silently labeling him a full-blown psycho. They're also thinking about ditching him for good once they're out of school. Then, to divert the conversation, one of Youngmin's friends asked about what he plans to do with Ryu, referring to him as his errand boy. Youngmin remembered Ryu as a gloomy loser, and with a sinister grin, said he obviously wouldn't let Ryu go. Even after graduating, he would continue to mess with Ryu until he got his fill of enjoyment. Then, one of his friends noticed someone and turned to call Youngmin's attention. He pointed out that he had found Ryu, Youngmin's errand boy. Seeing Ryu, Youngmin became excited, and the countdown for the New Year's Eve began with only 5 seconds remaining. But something unusual happened. A dark aura surrounded Ryu as he removed his hoodie and turned towards Youngmin with a cold, determined look, leaving Youngmin perplexed as he sensed that something was different about Ryu. Youngmin's confusion turned into seething anger as Ryu glared at him. He clenched his fists, ready to beat the crap out of Ryu. However, his friend intervened, suggesting that they let it slide since it was the new year. Just as the bell rang to signal the arrival of the new year, a chilling voice echoed through the area, addressing all the humans as if they were insignificant creatures. This unexpected voice left Youngmin and his friends stunned, wondering where it had come from. From above the sky, the angel descended ever so slowly, dressed in a pristine white gown with enormous wings to match, one eye obscured by a piece of cloth. The angel looked down at the crowd with an amused smile. She commented that watching humans always felt like observing monkeys in a cage. Meanwhile, the crowd below was losing control, some thinking it was an event organized for the new year, while others were taken aback, finding it all too real, and some were already enamored by the angel's beauty, calling her hot and pretty. Ryu, on the other hand, glared up at her. Even though she looked hot, after seeing her for the 99th time, his anger still boiled within him. The angel let out a slight laugh, calling all the humans trash for falling for her beauty. She warned them not to have any naughty thoughts, as she had no intention of mingling with trash like them, and the people just listened to her in utter silence, shocked. With her hand resting on her chin and a look that seemed like she was contemplating something delicious, the angel said that since they all appeared stunned, it must mean they can see and hear her, and so her game should begin. At that moment, a drunken man yelled at the angel, cursing her, questioning her cosplay, and even calling her a bitch. Ryu, upon hearing, felt a sense of pity for the man. In the next instant, the angel's warm, inviting smile twisted into a horrifying, deathly glare. Her eyes glowed a menacing red, her expression became scary, and with just a simple flick of her finger, the man's head popped like a bubble, splattering blood all around. The crowd, now truly horrified, erupted into chaos, scattering in every direction. Continuing with her terrifying aura, the angel pointed her finger at the crowd. She spoke in a chilling tone. "How dare a lowly human speak informally with my mighty self?" Then, as if switching a button, her aura returned to its previous kind state. She spoke politely but firmly, warning the crowd that they had no right to question her if they didn't want their heads to explode like that unfortunate man. Panic began to wash over the crowd like a tidal wave. She began to explain what they had to do and what this game was all about. Ryu, on the other hand, remained frustrated as he had to listen to her once again. With a warm smile and a kind aura, she extended her hand forward and stated that they would have to play a simple game. This game would consist of 20 rounds and would start on the first of every month. Their souls would be transported to another world, and after clearing each round, they could return to Earth. It sounded simple enough. Hearing this, the crowd was confused, thinking they could live just by playing a simple game. Even Youngman was a bit panicked. Then, the angel dropped another bombshell, saying, "Who said all humans will live? Even if they complete the quests, only half of the participants will survive." She then proudly declared how kind she was for sparing half of them, and Ryu just stared at her, not uttering a single word. Then, the angel let slip another piece of shocking information, that she wouldn't be taking all the humans. With a naughty smile, she explained that she would only take humans between the ages of 15 to 29. Upon hearing this, one man got incredibly happy, making strange faces and shouting that he was saved and wouldn't have to die. Another young man grabbed the old man's collar in frustration, and they began to fight. Panicked, Youngman stepped in to stop them, warning them to remember what happened to the guy who had shouted, his head popping like a bubble. The angel turned around and began counting. After some time, she declared that a total of 1.8 billion humans were present. With a warm smile, she flicked her fingers, and in the next moment, Ryu found himself in a room surrounded by nothing but whiteness. The angel started to explain that in this place, the participants could create a physical body exactly as they wanted, and their souls would be transferred into that body. Standing in front of a mirror, Ryu instantly created a character without much thought, using the body from his previous regression. He chose the nickname Black Scythe. A bright light covered his eyes, and in the next moment, a beautiful field appeared, filled with lush greenery, forests, and mountains. Ryu, with his badass character, magically appeared here with jet black hair and piercing red eyes. Clenching his fist, he mused how using this body so many times had made it feel almost like his real one. Slowly, other participants began to appear in the landscape. Their faces showed fear, panic, and in some cases, awe at their own transformation. Some had chosen appearances resembling famous movie stars or strikingly good-looking personas. Ryu looked at them and thought back to his own initial choices. He remembered that he too had first opted for a flashy, handsome appearance, but that had drawn too much attention, and because of that, he died pathetically. So now, he chose to keep it as simple as possible, avoiding unnecessary attention. Then Ryu's eyes shifted toward Youngman, that piece of work who always made life miserable for him. In this new world, Youngman looked pretty much like his real-world self, just taller and more muscular. He walked with a proud smile and eyes that sparkled. Ryu couldn't help but flash a grin mixed with sweat, noting that Youngman, true to form, had buffed up his character again. Then the angel congratulated everyone on crafting their desired bodies, mentioning how their fearful expressions delighted her. One man dared to ask, saying, "It doesn't seem like 1.8 billion people are here. Is there an error?" Hearing this laughingly, the angel replied, addressing humans as inferior, and she shouted, saying, Did she give them permission to speak? She stated that there were many angels taking care of small groups, and it was none of their business. She warned that if anyone spoke without her permission, she would pop their head like a bubble. Saying this, she started the quest. Then she commanded all the humans to say, "Status window." And as they did, a status window appeared in front of them. Just like always, Ryu's stats were trash, with his strength, intelligence, agility, and luck all at 3, without any normal or skill. The angel continued, saying, "Now that everyone has opened their status window and got familiar with this system, specially designed like a game for trash humans to understand easily," she gave an evil smile and extended her hand forward. She announced that if they increased their levels and cleared the 20 rounds, they would be granted a wish, and they could wish for anything they wanted. Hearing this, everyone, including young men, got stunned. Then, with an amused smile, she announced that now she would give everyone their unique skill. In front of them, a crystal appeared, and when they broke the crystal, they got their unique skill. As young Min broke his crystal, he was shocked, and then the angel said, "Since all of them received their unique skill, let the game begin." With a flick of her finger, a notification appeared in front of everyone, instructing them to kill 100 goblins to survive this round. And just like that, a goblin appeared in front of them. The sight of the goblin approaching them with a dagger sent shivers down the participants' spines. Just when they thought things couldn't get worse, the angel had another surprise. Spreading her legs, spreading her hands wide, she summoned a whole army of goblins, amplifying the panic among the participants. The angel couldn't be happier, her mischievous smile reflecting her delight at the prospect of a life-or-death battle between 10,000 humans and 50,000 goblins. Suddenly, a goblin charged at the crowd. The tension was palpable. But then, to everyone's surprise, Ryu stepped forward, unarmed. As he advanced towards the charging goblin, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Everyone tried to warn him, claiming it was too dangerous. However, Ryu seemed to have a different plan in mind. With remarkable force, he delivered a powerful kick, sending the goblin flying backward and shocking the entire crowd. He changed his plans and decided to show his full power to the crowd, as it was part of his future plans. Picking up the goblin's dagger, Ryu fixed his gaze upon the angel, determined to capture her attention. Then, as 2 more goblins charged at him, Ryu got ready with his dagger. In a flash, both were slain. Again, all the people were shocked, saying how cool Ryu was. Then one person started to say that these goblins might be weak, and they too could easily kill them, believing it was not a big deal. But before he could finish their sentence, a goblin jumped at them, grinning, and stabbed them to death. Witnessing this, everyone panicked and started to run. Meanwhile, Ryu effortlessly continued to eliminate the goblins. As they witnessed the horrifying scene of goblins mercilessly killing humans, Ryu knew that now there would be only one thing on the minds of these people: survival. Some might try to run, but the area was protected by a barrier, so escape was impossible. Others might hesitate to kill a living being, but in order to survive, they had no choice but to fight or be killed. Ryu explained how he had once been like them, but after going through this round 99 times, despite being weak, he knew all the movements and weaknesses of the goblins like the back of his hand, making it easy for him to kill them. Watching the scene unfold from above, the angel was having a ball. She was genuinely enjoying the chaos of goblins and humans fighting each other. With a smirk, she commented on how the humans, who she referred to as monkeys, were struggling against the goblin. Even though the goblins had smaller, weaker bodies, when they were armed with daggers, they seemed to have the upper hand. However, her gaze eventually landed on Ryu, who was tearing through the goblins like a whirlwind. She took note of his nickname, Black Scythe, and realized he had already taken down 70 goblins in a short span. A hint of annoyance crossed her face. Ryu's dominance was ruining her entertainment. But, shrugging it off, she said to herself, it can't be helped, and shifted her focus to watch other humans fight for their lives. Ryu, on the other hand, continued his onslaught, becoming a one-man killing machine. The goblins started to fear him. Seizing the moment, Ryu checked his status window. He had leveled up to 4 and had 6 stat points to allocate. Without hesitation, he dumped all his points into agility, explaining that agility not only boosts dodging ability, but also impacts attack and movement speed. At the start, agility's the real MVP, Ryu thought. Looking at his dagger, Ryu said out loud, "This should get that pesky angel's attention." With a swift throw, his dagger found its mark, embedding itself in a goblin's head. With his arm still outstretched from the throw, he confidently declared his intent to wipe out all the goblins that day. The goblins shivered in fear, sensing the resolve in his voice. Ryu, not missing a beat, got back to work, and in no time, he had reached his goal. 100 goblins defeated. After successfully completing the quest, a bright yellow light enveloped Ryu, creating a protective shield that kept the goblins at bay. Standing there with a cool, collected expression, he remarked that the first round was a piece of cake. He'd gone all out, slicing through goblins like a maniac, just to grab that angel's attention. But truth be told, there was another reason too. Then, with a sly grin, Ryu shared that he was also aiming for a secret reward. The system, impressed by his lightning-fast completion time of 10 minutes and 21 seconds, congratulated Ryu for achieving rank 1 in all the zones, setting a new historical record. Feeling pretty pleased with himself, Ryu explained that he had an ace up his sleeve. As a reward, the system granted Ryu a coupon, a real game changer. With it, he could choose any low-rank rare weapon he wanted, absolutely free. Ryu, still sporting a hand stained with goblin blood, eagerly clicked the coupon, and before him materialized an array of weapons. However, there was a tinge of disappointment in his eyes. You see, his trusty main weapon was a scythe, a rare find indeed. So, begrudgingly, he settled for a dagger, tossing aside the measly goblin dagger like it was trash. Meanwhile, the other players were still caught up in a life-and-death struggle. Ryu, though, was in a league of his own. He casually checked his status window, and there was a title that caught his eye, one he'd never encountered in his previous 99 lives, The Last Time Regressor. This was new to him, and he couldn't help but wonder what it meant. The scene shifted to a flashback, giving us a glimpse of how Ryu earned this new title. Ryu, maintaining his poker face, had utilized the Ryun stone, causing it to slowly fade away as he revived his unique skill, Regression. However, the system promptly notified him that this marked the 100th time he'd used this skill, and it was now time to bid farewell to it. Now, this wasn't much of a shock to Ryu, who had anticipated that his skill would be removed after the 100th use. Otherwise, he might have regressed infinitely. However, there was a twist in the tale. Another system notification popped up, catching Ryu off guard. It informed him that this 100th regression had earned him a special title, The Last Time Regressor. This news left Ryu genuinely stunned. You see, in this world, titles were exceedingly rare, and each one came with its own set of skills and stat boosts. Intrigued, Ryu examined his new title and what it offered. Upon death, he would be resurrected with full health, and what's more, he could choose the exact location where he'd return to the land of the living. This, however, was a one-time use ability. At this revelation, Ryu broke into a smile, a genuine one. He rested his chin on his hand, realizing he'd just laid his hands on something truly extraordinary. After that, Ryu, feeling a bit restless, stretched out his arms. He was honestly getting bored and wondered how Youngman was faring. After a quick look around, he spotted Youngman. The dude was still kicking. Ryu smirked a bit, thinking, guess he's gonna make it through this mess like before. As time went on, more participants were finishing their quests. But the angel. She looked like she was about to doze off. She even said it was getting boring since there were now as many humans as there were goblins. Down on the ground, it was a completely different story. Humans were in a real mess. Some looked like they were on their last breath, while others were sobbing, holding their loved ones close. Then, out of the blue, that mischievous angel got a wicked idea. She decided to spice things up. As if things weren't bad enough, the terrified black-haired girl watched in horror as her injured hubby started to fade away, like he was just disappearing. And it wasn't just him. All the dead bodies began to vanish. Just as everyone was trying to wrap their heads around what was happening, a massive group of goblins appeared and rushed towards the humans, causing complete mayhem. From a distance, all you could see was a messy, brutal fight. Goblins and humans were going at it like there was no tomorrow. And up above, that angel was having the time of her life, laughing like a total maniac, and even had the nerve to say she was being generous by giving them 50,000 goblins for free. Ryu, on the other hand, was just chilling, sitting protected under his barrier. He didn't even flinch or show any emotion, even though things were getting pretty wild out there. After what felt like forever, a system message popped up. It announced that 5,134 folks managed to finish their quests, marking the end of the round. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, all the goblins vanished. This left the remaining participants totally baffled. The angel then dropped the bombshell. Since half of the folks who first showed up had passed the quest, the rest weren't so lucky. And as she broke the news, the unlucky ones began to fade away. Their cries and pleas filled the air, but the angel, she didn't bat an eye. She just sat there, soaking in the drama like it was some top-notch entertainment. Then the system notification popped up, displaying everyone's rankings, and Ryu was at number 1. He received another reward for being in the top spot, which was 1,000 gold. Meanwhile, everyone stared at Ryu with shocked expressions as they also realized he was ranked number 1. The awaited moment had arrived. The angel took an interest in Ryu, just as he had hoped. Smiling, she praised Ryu, acknowledging that someone being ranked number 1 in the entire world, region, and under her group was an accomplishment to be proud of. The angel called out to Ryu, using his nickname Black Scythe, and asked him how he became so strong. She began to inquire if he had received a special, unique skill, but stopped herself mid-sentence, cursing herself. Ryu replied, asking if she couldn't already tell what unique skill he had since she was an angel. The angel panikedly responded that of course she could, as she was a mighty angel, and she was merely asking. Ryu smiled inwardly, knowing that she couldn't actually discern his unique skill. Then Ryu dropped a bombshell, asking the angel for a favor. That wiped the smile off her face. You could hear a pin drop as everyone's jaws hit the floor. Ryu, bold as brass, said the rewards were a bit naff and he wanted something more. The crowd couldn't believe their ears. How could he talk to an angel like that? The angel, though, she was fit to burst. Rage was bubbling up inside her like a volcano ready to blow. In a voice that could curdle milk, she asked Ryu to spit it out. What did he want? Ryu, never losing his cool, said he wanted a better prize. The angel was seething, her eyes turning as dark as the abyss, a terrifying aura swirling around her, veins popping out like she was about to go supernova. Slowly, her hand reached out like she was going to squash Ryu's head like a grape, but she stopped herself mid-reach. She remembered she couldn't use her head-popping power again. Not yet. She had a 1-per-day limit, and she had already used one before. In a sudden twist, the angel had an idea pop into her mind. With a cheeky smile, she told Ryu that she's got a reward Ryu will definitely like, and then she slowly came down on ground, saying normally she'd ignore such a bold request. But she's taken a liking towards Ryu, and she wanted to chat one-on-one in private, telling the rest of the humans stay for a moment as they will return soon. The angel and Ryu headed off toward the jungle, leaving the crowd with envy. They all thought, man, maybe we should have asked for better prize, too. But they quickly realized that only a top dog like Ryu could make a big ask without, getting his head blown up. As they dipped, Ryu shot a look back at Youngman, leaving the guy scratching his head. Ryu just gave a sly grin and continued on. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, the angel was like, "Why you hanging back? I ain't gonna bite. Walk up with me." And Ryu just nodded. Internally, the angel was losing it. She thought humans were mad greedy and she had some, let's say, special plans for Ryu. Her face turned all kinds of sinister and she let out a low, eerie laugh. She thought once they passed a certain rock, they'd be out of the surveillance zone. And then she'd get her revenge, giving Ryu a slow, painful end. As she reached the magic spot, she tried to put on her best smiley face, telling Ryu he was about to get his special reward. But out of nowhere, a fist zoomed toward her. Before she could even dodge, bam! Ryu's punch sent her flying and made this holy being a holy shit. The angel was in shock as golden blood spilled from her mouth. She couldn't wrap her head around the fact that she'd been punched by a mere human. Pissed off, she pulled herself together and tried to locate Ryu, but the dude had vanished. Just when she thought she'd caught a break, out of nowhere, Ryu popped up right behind her, ready to throw down. In a slick move, Ryu got one hand on her wing and the other wrapped around her neck. The angel, usually so in control, was freaking out big time. She screamed at him to back off, but Ryu, he just calmly ripped off one of her wings. The pain hit her hard, and she blacked out for a sec, and when she came back to sense, Ryu was already tearing off her other wing, and golden blood was going everywhere, and she couldn't help but scream out in agony. Ryu, cool as ice, told her to quit with the dramatic act. Then he forced her down to the ground, stepping on her back and grabbing her last wing. She begged and cried, but Ryu didn't show a lick of mercy. With one last yank, he ripped off her final wing while saying now she will not be able to run and they can talk in peace. Now the angel, trembling, slowly turned back, and Ryu asked her if she was in pain, but she didn't say anything, just ground her teeth. Then Ryu smiled and asked her if he hadn't acted like that. It would be him in her place crying in pain, and the angel would be the one smiling maniacally. Hearing this, the angel stood up, panicked, shouting, "What the hell is Ryu saying, this nonsense?" She called Ryu insane for hurting an innocent angel. But then, with cold eyes, Ryu picked up the angel's torn wing and showed her the hidden dagger hidden behind her wing. He asked her if she was not planning to kill him with this hidden dagger. Then what was it for? putting it into her pussy. Hearing this, the angel was speechless. Ryu stood up, throwing the wing aside, saying he had done this for the 88th time, and it was still satisfying to do it, while the angel was confused, not understanding what Ryu was saying. Then Ryu dropped yet another bomb. He called the angel by her name, Burial, and told her he knew all about her and it was time for her to die. Now, scared, anger and shock mixed on the angel's pale face as she wondered how Ryu knew her name, thinking it was impossible. Ryu replied that there was no point in telling someone who was going to die and took out his dagger from his inventory, staring at it. The angel grew more and more panicked and started shouting that if Ryu killed her, the consequences would be heavy. Then, with an angry and loud voice, pointing her finger toward Ryu, she threatened him that if he didn't stop, she would use her skill and pop Ryu's head like a bubble. But Ryu calmly smiled and replied that she could do whatever she wanted, but she would not be able to use that skill, as it could only be used once per day. Now the angel was gritting her teeth in frustration, and then in panic, she warned Ryu that if he killed her, her comrades would not let him go unscathed. But Ryu, with a calm and calculating expression, simply said, "Comrades, my ass." He knew she was a virgin loser with no friends, and no one was going to come to her aid. The other angels didn't care about what happened to their fellow angel. Ryu slowly advanced toward the angel, and she began to utter threats about how he would regret killing her. But before she could finish her sentence, Ryu raised his dagger and thrust it into her chest with great force, ripping her apart. Golden blood splattered all around her, and she screamed in agony. However, Ryu's expression remained cold and calm as he stood over her lifeless form. The system then notified Ryu that he had achieved an unbelievable feat. He had become the first in history to kill an angel. As a reward for this act, he received two rewards. First, he obtained the angel's special essence, her juice, and second, he acquired an ability ruin crystal. This was the entire reason he had killed the angel, and he had succeeded in his goal. The ruin was known as the Ruin of Slaughter, and Ryu wasted no time in utilizing it. As he activated the ruin, it began merging with him, and the system promptly notified him that he had gained a unique skill known as the Butcherer. With this skill, every time he killed his target, all of his stats would increase by 1%, making him even more formidable. The system didn't stop there. It informed Ryu that he had earned the title of the First Angel Slayer. This title bestowed a tremendous advantage upon him, as when facing an angel in battle, all of his stats would double, turning him into a formidable adversary. Now, the most significant reward awaited Ryu as he held the angel's special juice in his hand. He explained that it was solely for this reason that he had taken the risk of killing the angel. This special juice, after consumption, would allow him to change his class to Grim Reaper. The Grim Reaper class was considered the natural enemy of angels, making Ryu a formidable opponent against them, as angels will be a pain in the ass in future. Ryu went on to clarify that in this world, anyone could obtain a class, but the process for achieving one was shrouded in mystery. People gradually discovered the criteria through trial and error. For example, one could acquire a warrior class by defeating a certain number of goblins within a specific time frame. There were a total of 30 classes available, but some were unique and could only be obtained by fulfilling special conditions, such as drinking an angel's special essence. These unique classes were significantly more powerful than the standard ones. Ryu had explored all the classes in his previous 99 lives and found that the Grim Reaper class was the best choice, enabling him to fight angels on equal footing in future. Ryu wasted no time in claiming his rewards for coming in first place in the entire region. He carefully selected a 3x experience buff for 2 rounds, fully aware of its importance. He already possessed valuable information and a good amount of gold, but he needed to level up quickly for his future plans. As Ryu made his choices, the angel's presence began to fade, and a soothing white light enveloped the entire area. The scene then shifted, and we found ourselves back on Earth with Youngman. He was panting and bewildered, slowly raising his head as he wondered if everything that had transpired was merely a bad dream. However, Youngman noticed something odd. He checked his phone and discovered that exactly 5 hours and 20 minutes had passed, precisely the same amount of time as in his dream. Gradually, others around him began to wake up with headaches. Youngman's friend also woke up, confused, and shared that he had experienced a strange dream. But Youngman observed something even more alarming. As he pushed his friend's foot gently, there was no response. Another friend tried to rouse the motionless man, only to discover that he was dead, his face pallid. Panic began to grip them as they realized that everything that had occurred in the dream was not a mere fantasy. It was a grim reality. Anyone who had died in that dream had met the same fate in real life. This shocking revelation was too much to bear, and fear overcame them. Youngman and his friends frantically assessed their surroundings, trying to determine what to do next and how they would face the challenges of the upcoming month. Amidst the fear and confusion, Youngman was trembling, but his tremors were not born of fear. Instead, he was shaking with excitement, a strange anticipation stirring within him. He was getting excited, thinking that in that world everyone was equal, and it didn't matter whether they were a president or a celebrity. In that world, strength was king, and he could do whatever he wanted. He could kill whoever he pleased. Meanwhile, his friends were crying in panic, scared that next month he would die as a virgin if he failed to complete the quest. But Youngman scolded them, telling them he wasn't the only one facing this problem. He urged them to stay calm and explained that all they had to do was kill some monsters to survive the next round. It was as easy as spreading butter on bread. Hearing this, his friends couldn't believe what they were hearing and thought Youngman was crazy to begin with. But now he seemed even crazy. One of them sighed and called him a bastard, saying that with his miserable life, he wouldn't be missed if he died right now. After all, he had tons of things he wanted to do. Youngman paid little attention to their words. He was scanning the crowd. His friends asked him what he was looking for, and it turned out he was searching for his personal punching bag, Ryu. He wondered where that little rascal had gone. He had definitely seen him heading in that direction before he passed out. Could it be that he couldn't even make it past the first round and died there? But still, not finding him, he calmly shrugged his shoulders. It made sense to him that a loser like him didn't survive, and most likely had died. Suddenly, something in the crowd caught his attention. He saw a man in medieval armor. Young men couldn't understand who this guy was and where he managed to dig up this outdated armor. But then he realized it could only mean one thing. The status windows were working here as well. As soon as he gave the right command, his status window with his characteristics appeared in front of him. He couldn't believe that it had worked. Young men immediately shouted to his friends to all try to turn on their status windows because it worked here too. They were once again shocked that it worked. Seeing their actions, the others also followed suit. But everyone was curious if this meant that they could use all of their stats and items here. A few hours late, to test this, Young Min picked up a small pebble from the ground and squeezed it in his hand. It shattered into small pieces, and the remnants of the stone turned into a saw blade that spilled out through his fingers. Seeing this, he let out an evil smile. A few hours later, the next breaking news was announced on morning news nationwide. Multiple angels were seen worldwide, and 9 billion people died overnight, while another 9 billion people gained mysterious powers, turning the whole world upside down. Ryu Min walked down the street with a serious face, reading the news on his smartphone. He thought to himself, it's just the beginning. The real chaos is about to come. The real problem was now on round 1. People didn't become that strong. They reached just the level of a pro athlete. The real chaos would begin from round 2, when they would get magical powers, giving rise to numerous criminal activities as modern weapons wouldn't work on them. Ryu wasn't going to sit back and watch the world descend into chaos. If he had left things as they were, the Earth would likely have fallen into ruins before the 20th round arrived. There was only one solution. He would have to control the other players by overpowering them, making them his slaves. With a serious expression, he realized that he needed to gather his 5 teammates as soon as possible, and he had some of them in mind. But then he said to himself, that's not important now. There's something even more important to do. He left with determination. He reached his house and knocked on the door of the apartment building in one of Seoul's neighborhoods. No one answered or opened the door, so he retrieved the key from its hiding place and let himself in. It was dark inside, and he noticed an uneaten instant cup noodle. Slowly, he approached his bedroom. There, his little brother, Wani, slept peacefully and carefree on the floor. Seeing him, Ryu couldn't help but let out a warm smile. He was glad that his younger brother was safe and sleeping peacefully. He continued to watch over his sleeping brother with affection for a while. Ryu explained that his younger brother's name was Wani, and he was in his 3rd year of middle school. With a sad tone, he continued, saying their family had once been quite ordinary and happy, But after their parents died in a car accident, a lot of things changed quickly for them. One of the most drastic changes that happened was that Ryu became his little brother's only family and guardian. As Ryu examined his little brother, he noticed a band-aid coming off his hand and some bruises on his shoulders, as if someone had beaten him up. Gently, Ryu glued the band-aid back on and just stared at his brother, lost in thought. Morning came, and Ryu woke his little brother up, informing him that it was morning and time to wake up. Wani, still sleepy, slowly woke up and questioned why he was being awakened so early, especially when he had no classes today. Ryu, seeing how lazy his little brother was, pulled the blanket off him, startling him and waking him up in shock. Ryu explained that they didn't have time to sleep, and that he would explain everything later. For now, Ryu instructed him to hurry and dress up as they had to go somewhere urgently, his face still serious. Wani took his time, not fully understanding what was happening. He yawned and asked where they were going, but Ryu, with a serious expression, told him that they didn't have time to relax and the whole world was in chaos. Wani asked if something was wrong with the New Year ceremony he was going to attend, but Ryu urged him to get out of the house first, promising to explain everything later. As they left the house and strolled down the narrow street, Wani couldn't help but notice a significant shift in his brother's demeanor. Ryu, typically carefree and easygoing, appeared unusually serious. Wani sensed that something out of the ordinary had occurred, but he hesitated to inquire, thinking that Ryu would eventually share what was on his mind. Then Ryu turned toward his little brother and inquired if he was aware of what was happening in the world. Hearing this, Wani got confused, thinking about what could have happened while he was asleep in his state of panic. Ryu urged his little brother to check the latest news on his smartphone search feed. Wani quickly scrolled through the updates, trying to comprehend the gravity of the situation. What he read left him in disbelief. Stories of angels kidnapping people's souls and transporting them to another world, where half of them had died with a heart attack mysteriously. Panic surged through Wani as he absorbed the shocking news. In his state of anxiety, he bombarded Ryu with questions, asking, did Ryu also get transported to that world? His brother told him that he had been taken too, and he could only get out after killing 100 monsters called goblins. Hearing this, Wani immediately began to worry about his brother's health and asked if he was hurt. He bombarded Ryu with questions, but Ryu reassured him not to worry about himself. However, upon hearing this, Wani became even more concerned. After all, Ryu was his only family, his only sibling, and dearest person. Ryu was his entire world, and the thought of something happening to his brother was unbearable. To fulfill both the mother's and father's duty, Ryu became the most mentally strong individual from a very young age. But having a strong mind and killing 100 monsters are completely different things. Seeing his worried little brother, Ryu smiled and told him not to worry too much. He reassured Wani that he would explain everything later, but for now, they didn't have much time, and they needed to take action. Then Wani stopped and asked Ryu to tell him where they were going. He was willing to follow Ryu, but all the information was too much for him to handle, and he would only follow Ryu when he told him where they were going. Seeing his little brother's wounded hand, Ryu turned to Wani and told him in a cold voice that they were going to attack the hideout of Taegyu, who was the leader of the bullies in his class, shocking his little brother. Still not believing that his brother had found out, Wani asked his brother if he really knew about it. Ryu asked back, did you really think I wouldn't find out? Now, Wani bit his lip, realizing that he thought he had hidden his secret well, but it turned out that his brother had known about the bullying all along. Now worried, Wani sat there thinking how he didn't want to get his brother involved in his life when Ryu was himself getting bullied and having a hard time. Ryu, on the other hand, seeing his little brother sad, apologized to him in his thoughts and said to himself that he shouldn't have known this in the first place, but he found this out during the first regression. After returning from the first round, Ryu Min just slept the entire day in depression, and his little brother went somewhere in the morning. After a while, Ryu was awakened by the ringing of the phone. Annoyed at who might be calling him, he reached for the phone, still sleepy. He asked who was calling, to which the voice immediately asked if he was the guardian of someone named Wani. Then it immediately added that he should come to the hospital immediately. After saying that, Ryu's pupils dilated in horror. The next second, he quickly got dressed and ran out of the apartment. And that day, his little brother got bullied so badly by Taegyu that Wani became blind with multiple fractures. Looking at his younger brother, who was sitting in the corner of his room with his arms wrapped around his knees, depressed, Ryu was shocked and angry with himself because he was so weak and pathetic that he couldn't even protect his little brother. And now that he is no longer that weak, pathetic loser, he will do anything to protect his little brother. And his first mission is to beat the crap out of that son of a bully. Then the scene shifts. and we see an old factory. And inside that, Taegyu was beating someone furiously, asking why they hadn't brought him 200,000 won each as he had ordered them to. Shivering in pain and agony, the man tried to say something, but only managed to squeeze out another painful groan. Taegyu took that as ignoring him, which made him even angrier. He lifted his foot and swung it at the poor guy with anger in his eyes. Then he began to beat the poor guy again with anger, who had no chance to resist, and it would have made things worse because his assailant was not alone. Taegyu's friends stood aside watching this one-sided beating with a chuckle, but they were actually tense and afraid of Taegyu's ruthless attitude, since he was very unpredictable and very cruel. Even the other high school students were afraid of him. Taegyu was 185 centimeters tall, and he had a rather large physique for a sophomore high school student. Undoubtedly, he was an overwhelming dominant among his peers, and was famous even among gangsters for his fighting skill. After a while, the man was finally done with the beating, screaming harshly. He scratched his neck and headed towards his buddies, complaining irritably that he couldn't buy a motorcycle today, as he couldn't get the money he was going to get today. Seeing the angry guy approaching them, the group of his buddies immediately tensed up. Unfortunately for them, their fears were realized as Taegyu approached his gang and asked if any of them knew anyone from whom he could get the money to buy the motorcycle. The gang was caught off guard, and each of them scratched the back of their heads nervously. Then one of his members suddenly remembered a name, and he turned to Taegyu and asked why they shouldn't call that tall guy with curly hair who was from their class. Taegyu's lips curled into an evil grin when he realized who he was talking about. Then he added that he planned to call him today anyway, since he thought he deserved a good beating as a New Year's present. They were thinking about how they would beat Ryu 1. Taegyu, with an annoyed face, said that Ryu 1 is basically homeless, and they will not get anything from him. Then he decided that once he comes, he will beat the crap out of him and make him blind for being so poor. Then suddenly, a footstep echoed in the empty factory, and in the entrance, Ryu confidently entered the building, while Wani hesitantly followed behind him. Seeing Wani, the hooligans started laughing, saying they were just going to call him. And here he is. He came on his own. Then, noticing another person beside Wani, standing confidently, Taegyu got annoyed, thinking who he is. Then he shouted loudly, cursing Wani, saying how dare he bring someone without his permission. But Ryu just stood there silently, glaring at them, and Wani started to shiver in fear. Seeing this silent treatment, Taegyu got even more annoyed. Then he angrily, slowly came toward Wani and asked him if he brought another errand boy. But before he could say anything, Ryu stepped forward with a smile on his face and confidently stated that he was his older brother. Taegyu laughed, then turned to Wani, who was standing behind his older brother, and reminded him that he had already told him to watch his language if he didn't want to get beaten up. And now he had come with his older brother to his hideout to get revenge with a mocking smirk on his face. Taegyu clenched his fists and told Wani that he and his brother would die today. Then, turning to one of his minions, he nodded and ordered them to act. The latter, not realizing what he was getting into, nodded in agreement with a happy smile. While Taegyu was standing behind with his arms crossed, his underlings slowly walked toward Ryu and started taunting Wani, asking if his brother had ever even killed an ant before. Now, standing face to face with Ryu Min, he compared his height with Ryu, saying how small he was, and how Ryu Min was even smaller than Ryu Wan. But before he could finish his sentence, a heavy fist came flying toward him, and the next thing he knew, he was lying on the ground, blood coming from his face and mouth. Seeing his friend's defeat, the other guy immediately rushed at Ryu, intending to strike him with his fist. However, Ryu Min dodged his attack and struck him in the jaw with his fist. The blow was so strong that the guy let out a painful scream and flew a few meters away, hitting some debris behind him. At the same time, the first guy, who had already recovered from the blow, as well as the remaining bald guy who was shouting angrily for him to die, rushed at Ryu again. However, this joint attack was of no use at all, as all they got was 2 blows to their faces and started crying in pain. At the same time, Taegyu was watching his buddies being beaten up and crawling on the floor with painful groans. Then he walked past the fallen members, came close to Ryu, and with a smirking smile asked Ryu that he must have been acting this confident because he must have some boxing training from somewhere. But it's not enough to defeat him, as, however skilled Ryu is, he will not be able to overcome the difference in weight class. Taegyu was 185 centimeters tall and had a sturdy build, while Ryu Min was 165 centimeters tall and looked frail. The difference in weight classes was obvious, and one could easily predict the outcome of the fight between the two, without even watching it. However, to Taegyu's surprise, Ryu didn't look scared at all. With a smile on his face, he turned to the big man and asked him if he was not watching the news. Hearing this nonsense, Taegyu charged toward Ryu with his punch, but to his surprise, Ryu dodged it effortlessly. Then Taegyu threw punches and kicks after kicks, but Ryu dodged all of them effortlessly. Now his vision was getting blurry, and he was breathing heavily, wondering in anger why he couldn't land a single hit on Ryu while grinding his teeth. At the same time, Ryu's fist lit up with a blue aura. Then he turned to Taegyu and said that if he had been watching the news, he would have known that attacking a player like him so easily was tantamount to suicide. The next moment, he threw a lightning-fast punch that hit Taegyu's jaw, sending him backward, but it wasn't enough to defeat him. Taegyu once again rushed to attack Ryu with a fierce shout of curses. However, to his surprise and confusion, his blow did not hit the target as Ryu suddenly vanished. Unable to believe what was happening, he tried to turn around with horror on his face. Before he could react, Ryu threw another punch at Taegyu's face. With a painful groan, Taegyu rubbed his nose, and then blood started to come from his mouth and nose with a broken tooth. Seeing his broken teeth, he screamed loudly in anger, declaring that today he would kill Ryu. It would not be a peaceful death. He intended to torture him before delivering the final blow. With determination, he once again threw a punch toward Ryu Min. But this time, Ryu didn't dodge the attack. Instead, he grabbed Taegyu's hand, leaving Taegyu in shock. Ryu Min started throwing a barrage of punches toward Taegyu, and from behind, Taegyu's underlings were left surprised. Taegyu noticed that Ryu was only punching his face, trying to humiliate him in front of his gang. This realization fueled his anger, and he charged toward Ryu again. But this time, Ryu kicked Taegyu with great force. Taegyu went flying and crashed onto the wall. The kick was so strong that Taegyu was holding his neck, struggling to breathe. With broken teeth, shivering from pain, and saliva coming from his mouth, Ryu slowly walked toward Taegyu, and with a cold stare asked, "Does it hurt a lot?" Ryu was consumed by anger because during his earlier regressions when he was weak, he had seen his little brother getting bullied and brutally beaten numerous times. Those memories haunted him, and he couldn't forget them. As Ryu slowly approached Taegyu, he was terrified, fumbling to say not to come close. Taegyu was still holding his neck and begged Ryu not to beat him more, saying he was sorry. However, Ryu didn't continue the physical assault. Instead, with a warm smile on his face, he gently held Taegyu's hands and asked, "Will you marry me?" He continued, stating that Taegyu shouldn't have messed with his brother. With a snap, a crackling sound echoed in the factory, and Taegyu started screaming in agony. Ryu had broken all of his fingers, and Taegyu was in excruciating pain, clutching his hand. But the torment didn't end there. Ryu grabbed Taegyu's other hand, leaving Taegyu in terror. With another snap, he broke Taegyu's other 5 fingers, and Taegyu started to scream maniacally. Witnessing this merciless scene, all of Taegyu's underlings ran away in terror, and even Wani, who had been watching, found it too horrifying to bear. With a serious expression, Ryu warned Taegyu not to touch a single hair on Wani's head. Taegyu, crying, promised that he would never do that. But then Ryu began to smile with a very happy expression. He grabbed Taegyu again, stating that Taegyu might change his mind in the future, so he had to ensure Taegyu would never mess with them. With that, he broke Taegyu's wrists as well, and Taegyu screamed in agony for hours. The scene shifted, and we see Ryu walking, his little brother hesitantly calling his name. Ryu stopped, and Wani asked in surprise how Ryu did that, and if he had learned some kind of martial art in another world. Hearing this, Ryu smiled slightly and replied that just like the news said, players could use their abilities in the real world. As an example, he pointed to his hand, which shone with a bright golden light. In the next moment, a black dagger appeared in his hand, causing Wani to gasp in surprise. Seeing the dagger magically appear in Ryu's hand, Wani got very excited and curiously, with sparkling eyes, asked how Ryu did that. Ryu, with a kind smile, replied that this is one of the skills he got from the other world, and all the other players can use it. Then, as Ryu was putting the dagger back into his inventory, Wani remembered what had happened at the factory and asked in the same surprised voice if Ryu had learned all his new fighting techniques from that other world as well. Ryu replied that he didn't learn any fighting techniques, and he was able to do that because he was faster than them. His dexterity stat had reached level 11, adding that normal people's agility stats were around 3 points, while professional athletes could reach 10 points. and his was 11. So now he was as fast as Usain Bolt. Wani followed his brother and asked what would happen if he level up. And Ryu replied that he didn't know, as he hadn't reached that level, and only by leveling up would he be able to find that answer. But from inside, he knew the answer. You see, in his 13th life, he told everything about him to his little brother that would happen in the future, and that he was a regressor. Because of that, Wani became the target of the other players and had been kidnapped by a player. Even though he was able to get revenge, he didn't want to feel those emotions again, much less have his younger brother suffer for it. Turning to look at his little brother who was following him, he told himself that he had to prepare himself to protect him in the upcoming fight between the players. Then Wani's stomach growled, and Ryu asked if he was hungry and suggested they go eat a good breakfast together. Hearing this, Wani happily nodded with shining eyes. Then the two brothers entered the nearest store. Ryu immediately headed towards the ATM. When Wani saw this, he asked where he was going, saying that the noodles were in a different place. But Ryu turned around and told him to wait for a few minutes. He went to the ATM and inserted his card. He looked at the screen and thought to himself that this was all he could save up to that point. His balance was 133,134 won, which was about $100. After selecting a transaction amount of 100,000 won, he pressed the button to confirm the transaction. Seeing the huge bills in his older brother's hands, Wani was surprised and asked why he needed so much money, to which Ryu replied that he needed it for something. Then the two reached an area selling premium foods, and Ryu asked Wani why he didn't choose something from here. Hearing this, Wani got startled, saying everything here is very expensive. Even the cheapest food here is for $20. But Ryu reassured his little brother that it's okay as it's New Year, and they should eat good food to enjoy the day. Hesitantly, Wani asked if they spend money on expensive food, will they have enough money for living expenses? Ryu replied with a smile not to worry about money, and just to buy as he has a way to earn a lot of money. Then, Wani excitedly picked up a packet of pork belly meat, saying he always wanted to taste this, and today finally he will be able to. Ryu from afar was watching his little happy brother with a warm smile. Then, Ryu approached Wani, who was shining with happiness, and suggested that they go to a restaurant together sometime and order some roast beef. But Wani smiled the happiest smile Ryu had ever seen, and replied that there was no need, as he had more than enough of what they had bought today. Seeing how happy his brother was, Ryu told himself to wait for only 5 days, after which he could give his little adorable brother as much food as he wanted. He will give his little brother so much meat that he will get tired of eating it. Then the scene shifts, and we see Wani took a piece of meat with his chopsticks and put it on a spoonful of rice. As he took a bite and chewed it, he happily said with a happy face that it was delicious, really delicious. Ryu was really happy seeing his little brother happy. Then suddenly, Ryu stood up from his seat and told Wani to wait here as he had a very important thing to do. Wani asked him where he was going, but Ryu told Wani that he will know in a second. Then Ryu returned after a while, and he loudly slammed his hand on the table, placing his pen on it. Confused, Wani then noticed many lottery tickets and asked Ryu in an uncertain voice if all these are lottery tickets. Ryu replied, yes, they are. As he was opening his pen's cap, Wani, with a worried voice, asked how many tickets Ryu bought, and Ryu replied, 20. Hearing this, Wani got panicked, realizing his big bro just spent his entire savings on some lottery tickets, and he asked Ryu in concern how he could do that, and if this was the way of earning money Ryu was talking about, as he should know that it was almost impossible to win them. However, his older brother calmly told him to trust him and just watch. Then he took a pen and began to circle the numbers on the lottery tickets. Wani was puzzled when he saw Ryu circling numbers on all the lottery tickets. Worried, Wani asked Ryu why did he circle the numbers on each ticket, and Ryu replied with a smile on his face that he did it because those numbers were the winning ones. Then the scene shifts, and we see the brothers sitting in their house with lottery tickets on the table. Ryu was calmly flipping through his phone, while his brother nervously held the phone in one hand and propped his head up with the other. The announcement of the lottery draw was made from his phone. Wani was biting his fingernails with worry, staring at the screen of his phone with the live broadcast. He thought they were in trouble if they didn't win a single lottery because they had wasted all their money. As the live broadcast began, Wani became more nervous and Ryu scolded him not to be so nervous and to stop biting his nails. Wani said that they would have been better off buying better food with that much money. Then the hosts announced that the first lucky number was 3, and Wani stopped biting his nails. The second number was 18, and the third was 9. Wani was shocked as he saw the numbers matching the numbers on the lottery ticket that Ryu had bought. As all the numbers got revealed, Ryu matched the numbers on the lottery ticket with the phone screen. He was overwhelmed with emotion, looking from the phone to the ticket and back again. With happiness, he asked Ryu if this was all a dream. Ryu replied it's not a dream and told Wani that he told him he had a way to earn money. Realizing it's not a dream, Wani raised his hand high, holding the lottery ticket, and happily shouted that they won the first prize. Ryu then told Wani to stop shouting, as if the neighbors heard them. They might get into trouble, and Wani stopped shouting midway. Then Ryu warmly asked Wani if he's happy, and Wani replied, of course he is happy, and asked Ryu if he's not happy. Ryu, with a smile, replied that he is, but he was not looking excited at all. He explained that he was also like Wani when he first won the lottery in his 15th regression, but after repeating it for multiple times, it became more like a mandatory process or an annual event. Then Ryu said to himself that he has to earn money quickly, as after the death of 9 billion people, and the item trading among the players will crash the economy like crazy. But it was not the end of the surprise. Ryu won first prize for all the 20 tickets. Now holding all 20 winning tickets, Wani was in shock, asking Ryu that this still doesn't feel real, and how much is the total amount will be. Ryu replied he doesn't know, but then with a smile, he said the amount is so large that it will shake the entire world. Ryu got off the bus and walked down the street. He soon saw a tall building in front of him. It was the main branch of Non-Hyeop Bank where he was to receive his prize. Normally, he would have been nervous before entering, but maybe it's because this is the 85th time he is receiving the grand prize. He is not nervous at all. The bank was crowded with customers, but none of them were lottery winners. Ryu went to the front desk in the lobby of the new building, and then he approached the employee on duty, telling him he is here to collect his lottery winning amount for the first place. Hearing this, the employee smiled and congratulated him on his winnings. At the same time, he wondered to himself how the guy standing in front of him, who looked like a student, was able to get the prize for the first place. Pushing his thoughts away and searching for something on the computer, then the employee asked Ryu where he had purchased his ticket, to which he replied that it was at the Yeonwi branch. Hearing the guy's words, the employee exclaimed in shock, unable to believe what he had said. His mind immediately went back to a conversation with his colleague who told him that this time, someone won the first prize for 115 games and all first prize. However, and his senior strictly commanded him whenever that customer will come, he has to treat him like a VIP guest. The employee's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Ryu, asking him if he is okay, and the employee panickedly replied he is, and told Ryu to just wait for a minute. A few minutes later, a middle-aged man appeared in front of Ryu, who smiled and thanked him for waiting. After shaking hands with Ryu, he introduced himself as Juno, saying that he was the president of the bank. Ryu simply replied that his name was Ryu. The president said that since he had won the first place prize, he had to congratulate him personally. Ryu smilingly thanked the man for congratulating him. Afterwards, the man offered to escort him to the place where he could collect his winnings, telling him to follow him. As they approached the door with a sign that read, Lottery Ticket Sales Team, the president announced that they had arrived at the place. As soon as they stepped inside, they were immediately greeted by one of the female employees who stood up and bowed to greet the president. Noticing some young man next to the president, she couldn't help but wonder who it could be. But she didn't have to speculate because the next moment, the president himself introduced the guy, saying that he was the first place winner and that he had come to collect his prize. Then he told them to make sure that their guest felt comfortable. Surprised to see the guy who was talking casually with the president, the woman could hardly believe that in front of her was a man who had won first place for 115 games. Having recovered from her excitement and doubts, she told herself that she should calm down and do her best to satisfy the customer. After greeting him, she invited Ryu to sit down with a smile on her face. He did so, sitting comfortably on the chair right in front of her. She then asked him if he would like a drink, but Ryu simply replied that he would not, adding that he would like to get right down to business and take his prize. After hearing Ryu's answer, the employee didn't take any more time and asked him to provide her with the tickets so she could confirm that he was the winner. Ryu immediately handed her a stack of winning tickets that he had brought with him. Looking through the tickets, the woman couldn't believe that he had bet everything on one combination. It could only mean one thing. Either the guy had decided to risk everything, or he could see the future. Having finished with the confirmation, the employee said that everything was in order and that he could take the prize for the first place. However, Ryu's next question about how much he would receive made the girl freeze, as even just naming such numbers was absurd. After a second of silence, she replied in a trembling voice that his prize is 22.5 billion won, which is equal to $16 million. After he received his prize, everything went pretty quickly. The first thing he did was start looking for a place to move to. That same night, he opened a stocks account because he had information from the future. He knew that the price of Bitcoin would increase by 500% next month, so he also planned to invest his money in it. After returning home, Ryu showed his younger brother pictures of their new house and asked him if he liked it. Wani happily replied that it was amazing, adding that he had never seen such a huge and beautiful house in person. But Wani was confused about one thing. He asked Ryu why he signed a rental agreement when they had enough money to buy a house. Ryu replied that he didn't have any more money, as he had spent it all. His phrase made Wani freeze in place, and Ryu casually added that he had invested all the money into Bitcoin. When his younger brother heard this, he froze in place again, unable to understand how his brother could so easily say that he had invested $15 billion into Bitcoin. Ryu Min approached his younger brother, who had turned into a statue, and patted him on the shoulder, assuring him that he hadn't done it without thinking, and he knew the price of Bitcoin was going to rise. He told Wani not to worry. Then, hugging Wani, he added that not to worry, as he had seen a dream, and in that dream, he saw new numbers of lottery tickets, and they could always earn money through the lottery. After his older brother's words, the eyes of the naive Wani shone with admiration, believing everything Ryu said. Realizing this, he immediately grabbed Ryu by the shoulders and began to shake him excitedly, asking him never to forget them. Ryu somehow broke free from his little brother's grip, thinking to himself that he couldn't forget them, even if he wanted to, after repeating it countless times. Then Ryu turned to his brother and suggested that they eat outside before heading out. Wani asked in confusion where they were going, and Ryu replied with a smile on his face that they were moving to their new house today. At the same time, at some unknown location, Youngmin was punching and made a big hole in the wall, and then with a villainous smile. He said to himself that pumping all the points into strength was the right decision. Swinging his fist at the end wall again, he added to himself that he was even able to get a power rune that doubled his strength. As he continued to strike the wall, he started to laugh maniacally, saying that now with this powerful fist, no one will be able to stop him, and veins started to foam in his hand as he clenched his fist, ready to go another round of punching the wall. Then the scene shifted, and we see Youngmin now in front of Ryu's door, slamming the door and shouting Ryu's name. When he didn't get an answer, he said first he thought Ryu died in the first round, but later he found his name was not in the list of the dead people, and Ryu was even ignoring all his calls. Then Youngmin's face became furious, thinking the way Ryu glared at him before the angel kidnapped him. He can never forget them, and he will only get satisfaction when he will beat him to death with his own hands. Then Youngmin started to slam Ryu's door continuously, saying if he is hiding inside, he will now come inside after breaking the door. However, a voice stopped Youngmin, and it was an old man standing on the stairs who turned to him and asked him what he was doing at that door. Youngmin asked the old man if he should mind his own business, since Youngmin is not slamming the old man's door. Hearing this, the old man, adjusting his glasses, replied that he was indeed the owner of the house, startling Youngmin. Then he asked Youngmin again if he had come to meet a friend. For a second he froze, not knowing what to say. He quickly adjusted himself to the situation, smiled, and said that he had indeed come to see his friend. Then he asked the old man if he could open the door for him. Youngmin added that he had suddenly lost contact with his friend, and now he didn't know how to get in touch with him. Hearing this, the old man was shocked. Then he told Youngmin that it was now an empty apartment as the student who lived there had moved out. Hearing this, Youngmin immediately asked the owner of the house if he knew when and where the student had moved to. But the old man replied that he had moved today, but he didn't know where he had moved to. Hearing the old man's answer, Youngmin was furious, and he clenched his fists in anger, wondering how he could have left without telling anyone. Then the scene shifts, and we see the duo arriving at the huge glass building. which was the size of a skyscraper. Wani exclaimed in surprise and admiration. Covering his eyes with his hand to keep the sun from shining, he said with shining eyes and amazement that the building was very tall. He was so innocent that he was even surprised that the door at the entrance was revolving. He didn't stop being amazed even when the female employee simply handed them entrance cards while his older brother confirmed their identities. Wani continued to be surprised that there was even a security guard here. Pushing himself up in the elevator to his room, he turned to Ryu and said admiringly that this place was really amazing. Stepping out of the elevator, they headed to their room. When they got to their room, Wani exclaimed again in surprise, wondering how big it was. His brother replied with a nonchalant face that it was about 330 square meters. Such a figure shocked his younger brother, as their previous apartment was dozens of times smaller. Looking at the apartment, Wani, still in disbelief that they were going to live here, asked, "Isn't it too big just for the two of them?" Ryu replied that they have a lot of money and that they should enjoy their life. Then Wani asked Ryu how much the rent had cost him, and Ryu said that it had cost about 22 million won a month, which is about $17,000 a month. The rent alone made his younger brother's head spin. He thought to himself that not so long ago, he was still concerned about the price of meat, which at that time seemed very expensive to him, and now they are spending so much just for rent. Following his older brother, who was still looking at the apartment they would be living in, Wani asked him if they could have chosen something cheaper. Hearing this, Ryu shook his head negatively and replied that the more expensive the services were, the higher the security, which was their priority after all. On the first of every month, all players will fall unconscious as their souls will get transported to another world, leaving their real bodies unprotected, and it was the period that was the most vulnerable for all players. During this time, they became vulnerable to disasters such as fire or earthquakes. But the biggest danger was not the cataclysms, but the assassins hired by other players. And so, when the time came, players would need to prepare to have their bodies in as protected a place as possible. After finishing his thoughts, Ryu turned to his brother, who had already settled in a bit, and asked if he liked the house. Wani enthusiastically replied that it was beautiful, and it still felt like he was dreaming. Then Ryu kindly said he is glad Wani is happy and that he liked it. Suddenly, Wani's face became a little sad. He then apologized to his older brother in an uncertain and worried voice. Ryu looked at him in confusion, not understanding what he was apologizing for. Wani continued in an upset voice, saying that Ryu would be transferred to another world next month, and he'd have to fight for his life. Knowing this, how could Wani enjoy and be happy? But this sad atmosphere was broken by Ryu, who patted his brother on the shoulder, asking him why he was so sad. He added, "Do you think I won't be able to come back from the next round?" But Wani didn't say anything, and Ryu jokingly told him to stop thinking about nonsense and follow him. He had heard that the shopping hall on the second floor sells really delicious food, so they should go and enjoy. Wani agreed, still worried. Then suddenly a message arrived on Ryu's phone. After reading the message, he realized it was from Youngmin, and Ryu continued to ignore him. Putting his phone in his coat pocket, he thought of giving Youngmin a visit. The next day, a sleepy Ryu came out of the bedroom and was surprised to see Wani fully dressed, preparing to go somewhere. When he asked him where he was going, Wani happily replied that he had ordered some rice cakes and was going to pick them up. Still sleepy, Ryu didn't immediately realize what he was talking about. As far as he could remember, this had never happened before. Although regression did not guarantee that everything would happen exactly the same way as in the past, it was a significant change. Turning to his younger brother, who had already packed up and intended to go, Ryu asked him why he had decided to buy them, to which Wani replied that he was going to give them away to the neighbors as a gift to celebrate their moving in, as he thought it would be good manners. Ryu thoughtfully replied that being on good terms with the neighbors was a great idea. Pleased at his older brother's praise, Wani said that he could distribute them himself, adding that Ryu could stay here and rest. However, Ryu disagreed, replying that they should distribute the gifts together. He then told Wani to wait for a while he went to change his clothes. After a while, they rang the bell of the first apartment, from which a voice came out seconds later asking who it was. Wani, with a smile on his face and a cake in his hands, good-naturedly informed them that they were their neighbors who had just moved in and now came to greet them. Opening the door, a middle-aged woman with a smile also greeted them. Then noticing that the two looked very similar, she asked if they were brothers, to which Wani smilingly replied that they were. Handing the woman a rice cake, he advised her to eat them while they were still warm. She happily received the cake and thanked the brothers. Then, after some more time, they continued to greet their neighbors, continuing to give them gifts and after an hour they were almost done with greeting the neighbors and heading to the last place. This was the top floor, and the most expensive and the most secure one. While Wani was ringing the doorbell, Ryu was thinking to himself that there must have been someone from a rich family or a celebrity in such a place. Even after ringing the bell for a while, no one answered his call, causing him to have thoughts that perhaps no one was home. Pressing once more and getting no answer, he turned to his older brother, who was standing by the wall, and said a bit confusedly that it looked like no one was here. Turning around, they were about to head for the elevator, but the sound of the doors opening made them turn around. The person they saw in the next moment shocked Wani, while Ryu, although a little surprised, didn't change his face much. In front of them was a girl who had a beautiful appearance and was dressed in elegant clothes, who was looking at them with incomprehension. So, the video ends here. What do you think will happen next? Write in the comments and give a pink heart in the comments if you watched till here. Thank you.